I thought the hacker who tore my life apart was just a faceless ghost in the code, until I smelled her perfume on my wife's neck. 3 days. That's how long we've been at war, me behind screens, tracing firewalls and encrypted trails, her leaving digital traps like breadcrumbs soaked in blood. I barely slept. I barely ate. My mind was a battlefield of flashing alerts and racing heartbeats. And then, silence. No more attacks. No more taunts. Just peace. Or so I thought. That night, when Lena wrapped her arms around me, I caught a scent that froze me solid, violet and smoke. The same one that lingered on the hacker's encrypted messages, in the digital signature she left like perfume on every system she touched. That was the moment I realized my enemy wasn't some phantom behind a screen. She was lying right beside me. My name's Ethan Cole. I make a living chasing ghosts through code. People call me a cybersecurity engineer, but what I really do is fight shadows, ones that know how to hide inside a single misplaced line of data. Every day, I sit inside a glass office in downtown Seattle, surrounded by hums of cooling servers and the steady pulse of monitors. Most days, I forget what sunlight looks like. My firm, AegisNet, doesn't handle small-time breaches, we go after the kind that make headlines. Ransomware gangs. Blackmail syndicates. Hackers who weaponize information. To everyone else, it's thrilling. To me, it's my duty. I don't do it for glory. I do it because I've seen what a single stolen file can do to a life. And through all of it, Lena kept me human. She was my reset button. The one who'd pull me away from the screens at midnight with a plate of reheated pasta and a smile that could defuse any crisis. She'd tease me, calling me robo-husband whenever I lost track of time. I'd laugh, apologize, and she'd press a kiss to my forehead before heading off to bed. Those little rituals mattered, the smell of her coffee every morning, the faint tune she hummed while brushing her hair. The things that made the long hours tolerable. We'd been married for 6 years. No kids. Just the two of us and the quiet rhythm of life that felt safe. Predictable. Until Project Sentinel. It started as just another case, an elusive hacker calling herself Specter. She'd hit 3 Fortune 500 companies in 2 months, erasing trails like smoke in the wind. Every signature, every exploit, every timestamp, perfectly forged. She was an artist. The kind that didn't just break systems, she broke the people who built them. AegisNet assigned her case to me personally. And I took it as a challenge. For the first time in months, I felt that old rush. The thrill of a worthy opponent. The hunt. But it came with a cost. Late nights turned into all-nighters. I'd stare at the cascading code while Lena slept alone in our bed. I'd miss breakfast, then dinner, promising I'd make up for it. She never complained. Not really. She'd just smile faintly and say, "I'll keep your coffee warm, hero." But I noticed the changes. The new perfume, sharp, smoky, nothing like the floral tones she used to wear. The way her phone never left her side. The quiet smile when she read a text, then quickly flipped the screen face down. At first, I chalked it up to boredom, maybe loneliness. God knows I wasn't giving her much attention. But one night, when I came home past midnight, the house was quiet except for the faint click of her keyboard from the living room. She closed her laptop fast when I entered. Too fast. Late night? I asked. Just emails, she said, smiling. Are you hungry? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But in my world, reflexes like that meant secrets. Still, I ignored the gnawing suspicion. I told myself love required trust, and trust meant not digging into the person you shared a bed with. That night, I sat beside her, our hands barely touching on the couch. The news was running stories about Specter again. Another company breached. Another ransom was paid. Lena watched silently, her expression unreadable. I remember joking, "I'd love to meet that ghost someday. See what makes her tick." She smiled faintly, eyes still on the screen. "You already do," she murmured. I thought she was just being playful. I laughed. She didn't. Looking back, I should have noticed then, the hesitation in her tone, the flicker in her gaze. But I was too tired. Too trusting. Too proud to think the greatest hacker I'd ever hunt could be sitting 3 feet away from me. I thought the war was happening online. I didn't realize it had already reached my home. The first time Specter slipped past my defenses, I didn't even notice. I was running network diagnostics when the intrusion alert flared red on my primary monitor, 1 breach, then 2, then 6 in sequence. The code signature was elegant, surgical. Whoever this hacker was, she didn't just attack. She danced through systems. Every countermeasure I deployed was turned against me like a mirror. Within an hour, she'd breached an encrypted sandbox I'd designed myself, a digital vault that had never been cracked. My fingers shook on the keyboard. It wasn't scary at first. It was an admiration. She was better than anyone I'd ever gone up against. But as the night stretched into dawn, admiration bled into obsession. 3 days. No sleep. Barely any food. I lived in that chair, chasing traces through virtual tunnels that led nowhere. Every trail she left vanished seconds before I reached it. Every line of code she wrote felt personal, taunting, familiar. Then came the first message. "You're clever, Ethan. But cleverness isn't enough. No hacker should have known my name. Not unless they'd breached internal logs, bypassed security layers I personally oversaw." I felt the first sting of unease. By the second night, she was in my head. Every move I made, she anticipated. Every trap I set, she disarmed like she'd done it before. I started to wonder if Specter had studied me, my strategies, my algorithms. The precision was uncanny. She mirrored my own syntax, my preferred encryption loops. Her taunts even borrowed phrases I used in code comments. // nice try. / too slow, hero. The nickname hit harder than it should have. That's what Lena used to call me. At home, things were unraveling too. Lena had started working late at her marketing firm, odd hours for a job that was mostly remote. Her phone was always face down, notifications silenced. When I asked about it, she smiled and said she didn't want to distract me during work mode. She was right. I was constantly working. Still, the distance between us felt sharper. I'd reach out across the couch, and she'd shift slightly away without realizing. Little things. The warmth was fading, replaced by polite silence and shallow smiles. One morning, I woke to the smell of that smoky perfume again, the one I couldn't name, the one that lingered on her skin long after she left for work. I asked where she got it. "Gift from a client," she said quickly, turning to pack her bag. "It's nice, right?" I nodded, forcing a smile. But something in her tone, it carried that same elusive rhythm as Specter's messages. Calm. Calculated. That night, I tried to fix things. I booked dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown, the one where we first said "I love you." When I told her, she hesitated. "I can't tonight, Ethan. I've got a late call with the London office." "You understand, right?" I did. Or at least, I pretended to. I sat at that table alone anyway. 2 glasses of wine. 1 untouched. When I got home, she was asleep, or pretending to be. I watched her for a moment, her face half hidden by the glow of her phone screen on the nightstand. A faint message notification pulsed before fading. Unknown number. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Back at work, I doubled down. Specter had gone quiet for almost 12 hours. Too quiet. Then, without warning, she returned, stronger, sharper, like she'd learned from every encounter. Firewalls collapsed. Decoys failed. My systems core began spitting errors faster than I could patch them. At 3:17 a.m., my terminal froze, then flickered. The screen turned black for several seconds before a distorted image appeared. Static. Then a faint reflection, someone standing in the code window, half glimpsed through encryption noise. A woman's silhouette, short hair, delicate frame. It was only there for a moment, but I swear my pulse stopped. Because that posture, that faint tilt of her head, it looked exactly like Lena. I told myself it was a coincidence. A visual glitch. A mind running on caffeine and no sleep. But when I leaned closer, trying to analyze the pixel data, the screen blinked again. The reflection vanished, replaced by another message. You should pay more attention to what's right in front of you. I froze. That was word for word what Lena said to me last week when I forgot to notice her new haircut. I stared at the text until the letters burned into my vision. Was Specter taunting me personally now? Or was it just paranoia? I needed proof. Something real. I started cross-referencing time stamps from Specter's logins with the hours Lena claimed to be working. There were overlaps. Not many, but enough to make my stomach twist. Still, it didn't make sense. Lena didn't know anything about hacking. She'd barely understood how to reset our Wi-Fi router. Unless she wasn't working alone. The next night, I came home early. The lights were off, except for the faint glow from the office down the hall. I heard typing, fast, precise. Not random keystrokes. Purposeful. Rhythmic. For a second, my chest tightened. Then I reminded myself Lena said she'd been catching up on emails. I walked in quietly. She startled, slamming her laptop shut. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Didn't mean to scare you." She forced a smile. "You didn't. Just, finishing something for work." I glanced at the screen. The desktop wallpaper flickered for half a second, a faint image of green code lines before it vanished. Not Outlook. Not Google Docs. "Need help with anything?" I asked. No, she said quickly. "Just wrapping up." Her voice trembled slightly. I leaned down, kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled like that same smoky perfume, thicker now, like it clung to her skin. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. When I walked away, I caught my own reflection in the dark window, tired, hollow-eyed, unsure if I was still the hero she once believed in. The next morning, she left early. I sat at her desk once she was gone, staring at the laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to open it, to know the truth. But part of me was terrified of what I might find. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I turned back to my own screens, diving into another round against Specter. My heartbeat synced with every flashing line of code. Each defense I built, she tore down. Each attack I launched, she countered. It wasn't a war anymore. It was a conversation. She was inside my systems, my head, my life. And I had no idea how much closer she already was. I remember the night I found her. Or rather, the night I stopped pretending I hadn't already known. 3 days into the breach, I caught a break. Specter slipped. A single packet, just one, traced back to a local subnet. For the first time, the coordinates weren't buried behind foreign proxies or onion relays. They pointed to somewhere close. Too close. Seattle. Capitol Hill District. My pulse stuttered. That was our neighborhood. For hours, I reran the trace, convinced it had to be a false flag. But the signal repeated, bouncing through a cafe's public Wi-Fi 2 blocks from our apartment. Same signature. Same digital fingerprint. Specter was operating from my city. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, my stomach turned. I told myself it couldn't be her. There were hundreds of hackers in Seattle. Maybe thousands. But when I started pulling metadata from Specter's recent builds, I saw something that turned my blood cold. Her scripts used my own encryption method. A custom pattern I developed years ago for internal security, a sequence only 2 people had ever seen. Me, and Lena. I froze. Back when we first got married, she joked about wanting to understand my world. I'd shown her some code, laughing as she nodded along, pretending to follow. She'd smiled and said she liked the way I hid logic inside logic. And now, that same logic stared back at me from my screen. I wanted to believe it was stolen, copied somehow from my machine. But deep down, I knew better. Still, I wasn't ready to see her as an enemy. Not yet. I started running simultaneous traces, pushing my systems harder than they were ever meant to go. Fans screamed. Screens flickered. At 2:42 a.m., the chat window opened again. Specter. Specter, you're getting closer. Me, who are you? Specter, you already know. A chill crawled up my spine. Me, why me? Specter, because you built the perfect cage. I just learned how to open the door. I fired back a counterattack, flooding her with corrupted packets. She parried effortlessly. Then she launched one final payload, a flood of raw data so dense my system buckled. When the dust settled, a new file sat on my desktop. Voice.mp3. Against every instinct, I played it. Static at first. Then, a laugh. Soft, breathy, hauntingly familiar. Lena's laugh. I stopped breathing. I replayed it. Over and over. Each time, the distortion faded until there was no denying it. It was her. The next morning, I couldn't look at her the same way. She made coffee like nothing had changed, humming that same tune she always did. She kissed my cheek, told me not to overwork myself. Her touch felt foreign now, cold and deliberate, like a stranger imitating affection. When she left for work, I tore through the apartment. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I couldn't stop. Drawers. Closets. Desk cabinets. Nothing. Then I thought of the bed. I dropped to my knees and reached beneath it. My fingers brushed metal. A slim silver laptop, different from her usual one. My heart slammed. The screen demanded a password. I bypassed it in less than a minute. Inside were hundreds of folders, encrypted, layered with dummy directories, but I knew how to peel them open. One by one, her secrets unfolded. Transaction logs. Offshore accounts. Names of companies that matched every Specter breach in the past 6 months. Chat logs with an anonymous contact tagged, Cade, a known rival executive from one of AegisNet's competitors. They discussed payments. Access keys. My schedule. Cade, he's a perfect cover. You move through his system, nobody suspects a thing. Lena, I know his patterns. I can predict how he reacts. He trusts me completely. I felt the world tilt. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd used me. Every late night, every overtime shift, it wasn't the distance she needed. It was accessible. I kept reading, numb. There were screenshots of my system dashboards, private client documents, even our internal blacklists, proof that Specter had used my credentials for her attacks. I thought I might throw up. For a long time, I just sat there, the hum of the laptop fan filling the silence. When the door finally opened behind me, I didn't turn. Ethan. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I closed the laptop and placed it on the table between us. Tell me what this is, I said quietly. She froze. For a second, I saw the mask slip, the faintest flicker of fear in her eyes before she recovered. Where did you get that? Under our bed, I said. You really thought I wouldn't notice? She exhaled slowly, setting her bag down. Ethan, you don't understand. Then help me. My voice cracked. Help me understand why my wife's code is inside the systems I'm paid to protect. She didn't answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, she looked at me, not with guilt, but pity. You always thought you were the hero, she said softly. The savior behind the screen. But you were just another piece of the puzzle. My throat tightened. You used me. I needed you, she said, stepping closer. You had access. Power. You just didn't know how to use it. I did. Her eyes were steady, her voice eerily calm, as if this was just another logical debate, not the unraveling of our marriage. I shook my head. You were leaking clients' data. Selling it to him. To Cade. She smiled faintly. He believed in me. You buried yourself in your machines. I was tired of being the footnote in your story. I wanted to scream, to demand why, but words wouldn't come. How long? I whispered. Since the beginning, she said. Before Specter, before AegisNet. Before you started shutting me out. The sound of her confession hollowed something inside me. I fought for you, I said. Every day. I thought I was protecting us. She tilted her head. You were protecting your ego. I just learned how to live without it. There was no rage in her tone, only conviction, cold and cutting. I took a step back. You could have told me. We could have fixed it. Fix what? She asked, almost gently. This isn't about love anymore, Ethan. It's about evolution. You chase justice, I chase freedom. I stared at her, my voice breaking. You destroyed everything. Her smile faltered just for a heartbeat. Not everything, she said softly. You still have your conscience. You can keep that. Then she turned away, as if the conversation was over. I stood there in the doorway, my mind spiraling. Every late night, every whispered apology, every perfume-drenched hug, it had all been camouflage. The woman I loved had learned to weaponize my trust. I didn't stop her when she walked out that night. I couldn't. I just watched her leave, her silhouette framed in the hall light, and wondered. If she'd been Specter all along, or if my neglect had created her. The next morning, I deleted her system credentials. I wiped the home network. I erased her from every database that bore my name. But it didn't matter. She'd already copied everything. Her ghost lingered in my code, mocking me. Every terminal I opened echoed fragments of her syntax, little reminders that she'd beaten me on both fronts, the digital and the personal. I sat alone at my desk, hands trembling, and whispered to the empty room. I should have paid more attention to what was right in front of me. The same words she'd left me before. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea how to fight back. I didn't fall apart the way I expected. There were no shattered plates, no shouting matches, no cinematic collapse. Instead, I folded myself into silence and made a decision that felt like a physical thing, a new shape I could live inside. Quiet. Patient. Calculating. The first week after I found the laptop, I let Lena have the stage. She moved through the apartment like an actor who had already memorized the applause. She made coffee the way she always had. She hummed as she warmed leftovers. When she spoke, I answered in the small, measured voice of a husband trying to be normal, apologetic, contrite. Ethan, are you okay? She asked one afternoon, her head cocked, a practiced concern in her eyes. I'm fine, I said. I should have been there more. I'm sorry. Don't say that, she replied, dropping the pretense of interrogation. She reached for my hand. I let her. The smell of that smoky perfume curled around my fingers and left me cold. I lied to her with the most honest lie I had ever told. I was broken, scattered, helpless. The performance convinced her. Maybe she wanted it to. Maybe she needed me small so she could be bigger. But inside, I was building. I returned to work in the morning with a face other people recognized, strained, tired, a man who wanted credit for catching a ghost he hadn't yet named. I nodded through meetings, made the right quips at the right times, and then shut my office door and rebuilt everything I'd once destroyed. Not in the way I'd stormed into her laptop earlier. I didn't rush. I moved like someone assembling a watch, part by part. I collected patterns. I watched her online shadows. I created safe copies of her code signatures, the scent of her fingerprints in data. I tracked the rhythms of her nights, when she was online, which servers she touched, what kind of bait she wouldn't resist. I studied the way she caged her lies in language, the slips in grammar, the odd way she signed certain messages. I cataloged it all like a surgeon labeling samples. I didn't build weapons. I built an architectural lie. Call it a mirror, a trap, a patient engine. It wasn't a detailed recipe or a line-by-line plan I can recite now. It was, at its core, deception arranged with the same attention to detail I used on the defensive side for years, believable targets, believable value, but hollow at the center. A network that wore the right clothes to lure a predator, the exact sort of corporate honey a hunter like Lena would find irresistible. A place where she could move comfortably, convinced she was siphoning real treasure while everything she did was quietly observed and recorded. I set up fake accounts. Not realistic transaction strings meant to teach her a lesson with numbers. That would be petty. Instead, I planted stories, dossiers that looked like the private lives of the myths she liked to pry open, shell companies, compromised emails, control keys. I let them sit and look valuable. I dotted breadcrumbs leading back to places she trusted. I also left little echoes of myself in the bait. I sprinkled the language she trusted, phrases that mirrored my old code comments, the cadence of the man she had used. Part of me wanted her to realize it was me. Another part wanted her to never guess. People think revenge is instantaneous, a struck match. Real vengeance, I learned, is patience. It is the long folding of time into a single, inevitable moment. There were nights when I almost shattered the plan. I would sit with her on the couch and feel my hands curl reflexively toward her face, as if I could wipe away the betrayal like dust. She would laugh at something on TV and I would force a laugh in return. The perfume made my stomach twist. I'd lift my hand and try to trace the places where she'd once been soft, a freckle on her wrist, the scar near her left thumb, and then pull back because even physical memory had turned treacherous. I stopped telling my friend Mark everything. He was the only one I almost trusted and the only person with access to my conscience. We'd been roommates in college. He knew the way I skinned problems down to their bones and hated the things I pretended to be. When I finally let him in enough to say, "She's," and then stopped because the word mole felt monstrous, Mark's face went quiet. "Don't become what she is, Ethan," he said one night over beers, the clatter of the bar filling the spaces his voice left open. "You're better than this. Don't let this turn you into a version of her." I looked at him, sober, tired, hair sticking up like a broken halo, and the man I saw in that reflection was one who had already crossed a line. "I already am," I told him. It wasn't a confession. It was an observation. He didn't understand at first. Not the thief. Not a liar. The one who will lie about being broken so he can build a cell. He wanted to argue. He wanted to offer a moral ladder I was supposed to climb back up. I shrugged. "You think I haven't thought about turning her in?" I asked. "I've done the math. The headlines. The fallout. The people were ruined by panic. I can lock her up and we both die in the press. Or I can take control of the situation and decide how it ends." He set his beer down slowly. And if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, she walks free and I spend the rest of my life learning how I clouded my judgment, I said. If I'm right, she doesn't get to pretend she won. That settled it. Mark didn't say much after that. He saw the hard line in my face and decided the only help he could give was practical. He installed innocuous-seeming monitoring into our home network, things that would catch a reflection without being indictments. He did it under the pretense of helping me secure our systems, a favor between old friends. He didn't ask why. He trusted my silence. The weeks that followed were a sequence of small additions. I fed the mirror network pieces of data and watched what she liked. She always went for dramatic leaks, lawsuits, personnel files, blackmail-ready tidbits. She delighted in dismantling reputations. She moved like an experienced cat at a banquet table, efficient and elegant, not greedy. That told me something. She wasn't in it for the money alone. The thrill mattered. Which made the next discovery cut deeper. Buried in her correspondence were plans for a final take, a coordinated withdrawal from an offshore account so layered it would obliterate institutions, not just individuals. There were lists of names, custodians, shell managers, trustees. There was a schedule mapped out around dates and transfers. If executed, this would not be a single corporation's embarrassment. It would be a collapse that rippled across accounts, livelihoods, and a handful of people who had nothing to do with our marriage. Entire pensions. Small investors' savings. The scale made me sick. Of course she kept it tight, she always did. The plan was elegant, with contingencies, she was careful, as always. And she'd chosen a date that hit like a punchline, Lena's birthday. A final gift for herself, perhaps. Or a symbolic flourish. Maybe both. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the numbers speak until they blurred. The temptation to blow the whole thing wide open rose, a hot red thing behind my ribs. I imagined calling the authorities, hearing Lena's gasp, watching her wrists go pale in cuffs. I imagined her face stripped of the perfume and the pleasant lies and feeling hollowly satisfied. And then I imagined all the others, innocent people whose lives would fracture under the noise. The moral calculus turned gray and then black. That was not the kind of man I wanted to be remembered as, not by friends, not by the ghosts of people I'd sworn to protect when I took this job. So I made another choice. If I couldn't stop her from reading the book, I would rearrange the book so the last chapter read like justice. I began to synchronize everything, like clocking the beats of a heart before you cut. I timed fake transfers, set up the right-looking wallets, seeded accounts to look lucrative but designed so authorities would be alerted to any movement heavy enough to match her appetite. I built redundancies. I set trails that would end at the right moment. I wove the story Lena wanted to tell and then threaded a needle through its spine. Every night I worked until the sky changed colors. I tested, I watched, I corrected. I let her take small wins so she'd be confident enough to take the big one. I let her think she'd erased me from the map. She told me, once, over a quiet dinner she had paid for herself, "You always loved a puzzle, Ethan." I just solved mine. I replied with a gentle touch to her hand and a hollow compliment. "You always were clever." Her smile was satisfied like a hunter's. She kissed the top of my hand and walked away. I watched her go and memorized the tilt of her head as if I might need the shape of it later. I rehearsed my calm in the mirror. I kept a list of contingencies, lawyers I could call if something went sideways, encrypted backups of my evidence, a fail-safe that would let me disengage if the world turned too hot. Mark stood by with a single rule: no irreversible crimes. No ruining innocence. If at any point this was going to destroy more than Lena deserved, he would pull me out. "Promise me," he said that night, voice small. "Promise me you won't become hollow." I told him what half-truths had become for me recently. "I'll keep that promise." It felt thin. When the calendar count crept toward Lena's birthday, the plan became a living thing. Little variables demanded attention. Her mood fluttered between brash and careful. She polished some small victories at work. She called me hero in a text meant for consumption, not truth. She old-habited her way into confidence. On the morning of her birthday, I set the last pieces in motion, nothing dramatic, just the silent flick of permissions, the quiet rerouting of attention, and the final planting of a ledger that looked indisputable. I double-checked everything twice, then once more. I walked through the apartment, looked at the places that used to hold us close, and felt nothing but a clear, cold focus. I wanted her to be proud. I wanted her to be triumphant. I wanted her to think she'd won everything she'd ever wanted. And then I would show her the mirror. This wasn't about revenge that burned like fire. It was about justice that came like frost, slow, inevitable, and leaving the world clear and sharp in the morning after. Her birthday came like any other day in our building, mail clattering, the neighbor's dog barking, the rain starting its small, steady drum on the windows. The city smelled like wet asphalt and coffee. Inside, everything was arranged for a celebration, a small cake on the kitchen counter, a few candles, a card from me that said something neutral and warm. I watched it all like a director watching a scene play out for the 1000th time. She moved with a lightness that day, as if the world had forgiven her in advance. She laughed easily. She answered messages with quick thumbs. She put on the perfume that had been both signal and snare. She left the apartment twice, once to pick up flowers, once to run a small errand she called last-minute work stuff. Both exits were expected now. They fit the pattern I'd memorized. At 3:02 p.m., she sat at our dining table with her laptop in front of her. The screen was an open ocean of windows, each with a different dagger. She wore headphones this time, tiny and black, delivering whispers only she could hear. Her fingers moved. Calm. Precise. Ritualistic. I sat across from her with a glass of water and a face that matched the lined resignation of a man who had rehearsed grief into performance. I watched her like a scientist watches a specimen. "Everything okay?" I asked. My voice was soft. My hands were steady. She smiled. "This is it. Big one. The offshore is ready. The keys are in place. Tonight, poof. Freedom." She said freedom like a prayer. Like a victory lap. I thought about the names on her list. About the people who would wake up to blank accounts, about retirees who would pour coffee and find their savings gone. I thought about culpability and scale until both things blurred into a single cold fact: she didn't see them as people. She saw them as pieces. She leaned back and stretched, and for a second her eyes brushed mine. There was a flash of something, satisfaction, maybe. A private joke. She tapped the send button. At least, she thought she did. My screen, years of work and nights of scheming, had a configuration she couldn't see. Hidden routes. Permissions rerouted. Notifications staged to trigger an alert. Every ledger she thought she'd emptied I had mirrored into a dark net I'd built as a honeypot, an invisible fortress logged under anonymous accounts monitored by people who could and would act when the theater reached its finale. I had not involved the press. I had not wanted spectacle. I had involved the right doors. Quiet ones. Addresses that moved fast and didn't like noise. People who could shut a room down and take hold of a life before it could crumple 1,000 others into ruin. I pressed a key. The transfer attempted. It unfolded like clockwork. Numbers moved. Hashes matched. A single confirmation blinked, transfer in progress. Lena's shoulders dropped. Her mouth opened with a small smile. She nodded to herself, already imagining the cascade. She hit the last confirmation. And then she watched the numbers stall. She frowned. She frowned again. She checked the logs. Her confidence turned into irritation, into something sharp. She typed, her fingers fast. She tried manual reroutes, fallback scripts. She was good. She was smarter than most. She was patient, elegant and dangerous. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then the typing slowed. Her face went white. And then, with practiced disbelief, she leaned closer to the speakers. "Ethan," she said without looking up. "You see this?" I nodded. "Yeah." She snapped her laptop shut like a trap. She looked at me. There was fire in her eyes now. Not the same as before. Confusion gave way to anger. "Who did this?" she hissed. I kept my voice small. "Maybe a delay. Maybe an intermediary. Maybe a hiccup in their system." She snarled. "It's all routed. It can't be a hiccup." It was. She stopped herself and breathed, as if remembering the rules of the hunt. "It was perfect." "Maybe not perfect," I said. Her hand slammed onto the table. "Are you mocking me?" "I'm being honest." I folded my hands. "Control every variable. That's what you taught me." She laughed then. A short, cruel sound. "You think you taught me anything? You were a textbook I used, Ethan. Notes in a margin." The laugh died when the front door buzzer sounded. 2 minutes later, the knocks began, sharp, authoritative. I could hear the metallic clack of boots in the hallway. My stomach clenched, not with panic, but with the tight, satisfied pain of an operation that had reached the necessary cliff. She opened the door. 2 men in suits were there, badges clipped to their belts. Their faces were unreadable. Behind them, another team moved into the hall, quiet and efficient. "Ms. Cole. Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have questions about your online activity," the taller of the two said. Lena's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flicked to me, to the ceiling, then at the agents. She regained composure with the slow, practiced grace of someone who had rehearsed many exits and many denials. "This is a mistake," she said. "I'm just." The taller agent shook his head. "We have probable cause to believe you're Specter. Please step aside. We need to secure electronic devices." She smiled that same thin smile she used in negotiations. "You can't arrest people on suspicion without evidence." He reached for her wrist. Her reaction was not the cinematic struggle I'd expected. She did not fight. Maybe she'd rehearsed that too. Maybe she'd already calculated that resistance would make her seem guilty. Or maybe the moment she saw the reality of cuffing, the metal, the authority, something inside her recognized a larger game. I watched as hands closed around her. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was small. It sounded like a sentence. She looked at me, the perfume fogging the edges of the air between us, her hair unfallen, perfect as ever. Her eyes were bright, not with fear, but with a dreadful, resigned amusement. "You did this," she said. "You did this," I answered. Her lips twisted. "You couldn't even love me without controlling me." The words landed like a thrown stone. "You taught me control is all there ever was," I said. She blinked, then looked away. No pleading now. No attempt to bargain. Only an odd clarity, as if the handcuffs had stripped the performance from her like a second skin. The agents read her rights. They took her phone. They catalogued her devices in neat stacks. They moved with precise cruelty, efficient in the way a surgeon is, absent of pleasure, present only in duty. One of them shot me a quick look as he passed. No recognition. No judgment. Just the simple professional curiosity of a man who had walked into the middle of someone else's novel and now had to finish the chapter. "She's being taken to headquarters for questioning," the taller agent said. "We'll need a statement." I nodded. My voice felt far away. "Of course." They led her out. On the stairs, she turned and for the briefest beat, our eyes met and something like pity passed over her features. Or perhaps it was the faintest triumph, an artist acknowledging applause in the middle of being unmasked. The elevator doors closed. The team left. The apartment felt enormous and hollow, like a theater that had emptied mid-show. I sat at the kitchen table and let the silence press against my ears. The cake on the counter seemed obscene. I picked up a candle and held it between my fingers, feeling the wax cool. The taste of victory had an aftertaste I hadn't expected, a metallic dryness, a small, endless loneliness. Later, at the station, I signed statements. I gave them copies of the logs. I drew lines on printouts, circled timestamps, and highlighted anomalies. The agents nodded, took notes, then took the evidence. I watched Lena's face on camera feeds being processed, faceless now in the sterile bright of the room they put her in. She was quiet. Watching. Waiting. Not pleading. Not crying. Not raging. At some point an agent offered me coffee. I took it, because actors accept what is offered to them in a scene. I kept my hand steady. The world moved like an old clock. People performed their parts. Paper rustled. Computers hummed. When the arrest hit the news the next morning, my phone flashed with texts I did not want and messages I did. Colleagues reached out with congratulations wrapped thinly around curiosity. I read lines like, "How did you crack her? An amazing work." My name was typed and retyped in digital voices that made me feel both exalted and sick. I did nothing to correct them. At the office, they shook my hand. They patted my shoulder. One of our partners gave a small speech about integrity and the invisible people who keep data safe. They didn't know. They didn't know about the cake or the perfume or the way our apartment smelled like rain and lies the night before. They didn't know that the ghost they celebrated had been someone I'd kissed goodnight. I sat through the praise like a man wearing clothes that didn't fit. They called me a hero. They called me Sentinel. They called me the one who caught Specter. The words scraped like sandpaper. I wanted to stand up and tell them the truth. To say, she was my wife. To show them the photos, the laptop, the receipts. To demonstrate how close the betrayal had been. But I didn't. Who was I then? The man who denounced the woman whose face people would now say they'd never seen. The man who unraveled a person he had loved until there was nothing left but evidence. Instead I let the story be theirs. I answered questions with neutral pauses and carefully chosen phrases. "We followed the logs," I said once. "Lucky break. Good forensics." They clapped my back. They bought drinks. They toasted. That night I walked home alone. The apartment loomed like a set piece. The cake was stale. The candles were extinguished. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed where she used to sleep. My hands smelled faintly of perfume, hers. The scent lingered on the sheets, a cruel ghost. I closed my eyes and let memory run through me like a bad program, the way she laughed, the way she tucked hair behind her ear, the way she used to call me "robo-husband" with affection. Those small things felt like relics from a different life, both precious and poisonous. There was a message waiting in my inbox. A single line, no sender displayed. I opened it. Smell familiar? There was nothing else. No signature. No attachment. Just that smell of a question hanging in the air like smoke. I sat back and let the sentence settle. The floor was cold. The apartment, too loud. I thought of the agent's boots, the click of the handcuffs, the sterile fluorescence of the interrogation room. I thought of the lives that would scramble, the accounts frozen, the pensions saved from collapse because of one man's decision to intercept a crime. I thought of Lena in a cell, her features hardening into something that was not quite regret and not quite triumph. Justice had arrived in a neat, efficient package. It had snapped into place. It had left behind the shape of us. I had rerouted the money. I had summoned the agents. I had watched her leave in cuffs and felt something like relief. But when I closed my eyes I could still hear her laugh. And when I woke the next morning, the scent of violet and smoke remained. They called me the man who caught a ghost. But ghosts don't die, they linger. That line made it into every article, every podcast, every retelling. The analyst who unmasked Specter. They made it sound noble. Tragic, even. As if I'd fought a shadow, not a person with a pulse and a perfume I could still smell in my sleep. They called it justice. They called me a hero. But heroes sleep soundly. I don't. After the cameras moved on and the headlines dimmed, I went back to work. Different offices. Different walls. Same ghosts. People passed me in the hall and nodded with that small, careful or reserved for the survivor of a fire, the one who walked out still burning a little. They asked about the case. Never about her. I kept her name locked behind my teeth. The world had stripped it from her already. She was Specter now, the faceless, brilliant phantom. I was just the man who'd found her mask. The man who'd slept beside her every night while she wove her empire from my silence. Days passed like that. Clean, mechanical. Coffee. Work. Home. Repeat. The apartment felt wrong, too still, too neat. Her books still lined the shelves. Her perfume bottle still sat half full on the dresser, mocking me with its weight. I should have thrown it away, but I couldn't. It was proof she'd been real once. I told myself closure would come. That the world would stop smelling like her. That the keyboard would stop sounding like her laugh when I typed too fast. It didn't. One night, weeks later, I stayed late at the office. The floor was empty, just the hum of machines, the low buzz of fluorescent lights, and the faint tapping of rain against the glass. I was reviewing logs, as I always did now. Double-checking the cracks. Making sure the walls still held. At 11:47 p.m., my inbox blinked. One new email. No sender. No address. No traceable route. The subject line was short. 2 words. Smell familiar? I stared at it for a long time. The air felt colder. I could almost hear her laugh again, that low, knowing hum that used to echo through my ribs. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Once. Twice. I didn't open it. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and let the silence spread. Outside, the rain thickened, turning the city into a wash of shadow and reflection. In the glass, my own face looked wrong, half me, half memory. Somewhere between victim and villain. They called me the man who caught a ghost, I whispered to the reflection. It didn't answer. But the inbox did. The email refreshed itself, unread, still waiting. And for a split second, I swear I smelled it again. That same faint trace of smoke and violet, curling from nowhere and everywhere at once. I closed my laptop. Somewhere, somehow, she was still out there. And ghosts, I've learned, don't haunt the living. They haunt the guilty.